Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the weekly AI Yap, where I will be going through this week's AI news and talking about it for like 20 to 30 minutes and giving my opinions and all of that. So, this week in AI, there was kind of three big pieces of news, right? So you had the Mochi like text to video model, right? So it's a video like generation model. You had Stable Diffusion 3.5, and then you have the new Claude Sonnet as well as like computer use and all of that. And so, yeah, I'm just going to get into it. So we'll start with the Stable Diffusion 3.5 because that's kind of the smallest news, which is Stability AI released Stable Diffusion 3.5, and based on all the testing, it's not as good as Flux, right? It's a distinctly worse. I don't think it's a worse model. It's like of a similar tier. It's just a problem with it is that it's less controllable. You have stability, obviously, not wanting people to have anatomy in the model, so they have the model just kind of be really bad at that. And it's like the model just kind of doesn't understand the world in a similar way to Flux, right? Like comparing it to Flux, like Stable Diffusion 3.5 is like nowhere near as good, and it just kind of tends to be like it has that more like AI generated style, and that Flux just doesn't really follow as much. Like obviously you can still tell Flux images are AI generated, but like Stable Diffusion 3.5 is nowhere near as good. And yeah, so I think in general, like Stability AI is just kind of in a really tough spot, right? Because they're trying to do stuff and they're like dealing with internal stability issues, right? Like the old adage as it goes, right, is that OpenAI is closed, Stability AI is unstable, and so like AI companies are just the opposite of their names, right? And so like Stability AI, they're dealing with internal stability issues. So when they released this model, it was like, okay, this is not as good as like the other opportunities and whatnot, right? And so I'm just gonna leave it at that. This is just Stability AI is like them making a model cool, amazing. Then you had Mochi from I believe Genmo, right? And so it's a video model. It's an open source video model. You give it some text, it will generate some video, and it's pretty good. Now, of course, the problem with basically all the like I think okay, this falls into the same trap that basically all of the open source text to video models is that they don't have a world model. They're effectively just you image plus panning, right? So they just effectively pan around an image. They can't do any of the fancy stuff. Because if you saw that one Veo, like Google Veo, like demo, or even like Sora has some stuff like this too, where it's basically you're following a car through a synthwave city and it goes through a tunnel and then into a real city and it's like moving all over the place and all of that. Like that is a video model with a world model baked in, and it's like simulating the world and doing stuff there. Whereas here, all this open source stuff is just like starting from an image, you're doing panning, right? And so it's like you're not getting anywhere near as good as all those closed source stuff, and all those companies aren't releasing that closed source stuff because of the U.S. election, right? They don't want people making fake videos of like Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and so what you have is you just have like people waiting for the U.S. election, and so after the U.S. election, I think the whole bunch of floodgates are going to open, right? You're going to get a whole bunch of the new video models. You're going to get a whole bunch of the new like text models, right? Like rumored OpenAI Orion is coming out in November on Azure after the U.S. election, right? You're going to have so much stuff coming out after the election. It's just we're kind of waiting until the election because nobody wants to release something that then influences the result of the election, right? Because again, AI safety is kind of taking over a whole bunch of stuff. And so, yeah, what you have is you just have open source trying to do something. Because obviously open source from non-large corporates, right? Like Meta, obviously they care about the U.S. election, but just from like startups and whatnot, they don't really care about the U.S. election as much because they know that it's not going to end up being used by bad actors because they're not as popular, right? And so they're just not being used by as many bad actors, and so you end up with like open source being a little bit more free to do stuff. But again, once the U.S. election comes out, closed source is going to start pushing, right? And so yeah, so this is it's cool. It's the best open source tech like video generation model. It's cool, it's amazing, but again, you're running into the issues of stuff happening with like, oh yeah, it's just a panning, right? Cool. Now we also have in the topic of open source, because I'm gonna leave the new Claude to the end because I have some thoughts on that. But in the topic of open source, what you have is you also have the new Cohere models, right? So you have the new IA models. And so the IA models are meant to be Cohere's like multilingual models, right? So it's like 23 languages, they're better than before, and these are just better models. And so IA, the new IA models, I think they call it IA Expanse, right? the 8B is like better on Arena Hard. Now, of course, Arena Hard is a benchmark that is slightly easily gamed, because Arena Hard is a benchmark where you have an LLM. I believe they use GPT-4 as the standard benchmarking LLM, but they have GPT-4, but they have an LLM basically trying to figure out, hey, which of these is better, and they train them and they fine-tune it so that it like match what people voted on, like the hard problems they voted on in Chatbot Arena, and it's better than the other models of that. But of course, Chatbot Arena is now gamed, right? And so again, benchmarks are dead. Benchmarks are gone. They're dead. It's now all about like it's about vibes. You have to vibe check these models. The benchmarks are dead. And like this model is pretty good. It's multilingual, 23 languages, multilingual, more than any of the leading models, right? Like you compare to Qwen. I believe Qwen is only 5 languages they officially support. I know, right? Because it's English, Chinese, Spanish, French, and there's one more. It might be German. I'm not sure, right? So they support like 5 languages. Whereas the IR23, it's 23 languages. That's where the 23 the name comes from. And it's honestly a really good sign to see that a bunch of these models are becoming more accessible, right? They're becoming better at doing a whole bunch of stuff. And so now what you have is you effectively have models that are kind of more focused on expanding who can use AI, right? I think that's one thing you kind of tend to see. And I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the Claude section with computer use. But it's the main thing that open source and a bunch of people are doing right now is that there's kind of like 3 main avenues that people are pushing the AI field in. You have the let's go maximize intelligence, right? We're only doing one language, we're trying to maximize intelligence there. You have the let's try to make money from this by selling products and like replacing some of like the less intellectually taxing jobs and whatnot, or having like a first layer to like call centers and whatnot. Right? And then you have the third one, which is let's expand access to a bunch of the technology we have already. Right? And so what you have is like IR23 is like, hey, let's assume you only speak one of these other languages, right? What you can do now is you can now access these models, right? You have access to this technology in a brand new way. You're effectively breaking down digital barriers. And so, like, let's say you were previously a person, you're trying to learn some topic, like let's assume you were speaking a language that isn't English, but it's in like one of these like multilingual models, and you're trying to learn something new. But of course, most resources, they're in English, right? Everybody standardizes on English on the internet. Maybe you have some stuff in like French, German, Spanish, Chinese, but you don't speak any of those models. You speak language that not many people speak online, and it's like a very big divide. What you're able to do is use one of these models to effectively translate all the stuff for you, and then you can like chat with it, right? So imagine you speak one of these languages, and that's the only language, and you're trying to like say learn like physics. And so you go to like the Wikipedia of physics, or like a bunch of physics resources online, they're all in English, and so you get the models to translate it for you. And so they translate it for you, and then you can like talk to the models, and obviously you can Google Translate. But now you can talk to these models in your native tongue and get access to a bunch of this knowledge and learning that you may previously not have had, right? And so you're able to expand access to educational resources via using these models as a translation tool. And of course, if you think about where the transformer architecture came from, it came from trying to do translation, right? Like the original transformer paper was about encoder-decoder like strategies where you have the original text and then you encode it, and then you have the model generate text, and then that's the decoder part of it, right? But then nowadays transformers, you get rid of the encoder section. But like the transformer architecture is rooted in machine translation. And so what you have now is you just have these models that are like they're focusing on like multilingual and expanding the access to tech. And I think that's just fundamentally a good thing, right? Like increasing educational access to a bunch of people all around the world who like maybe don't speak English, who don't speak English is a good thing. I think fundamentally that's a really good thing that this tech allows you to do, right? And so you're effectively able to do all of this stuff, and the tech is allowing you to do it. It's like a great experience. Like it's going to be a great thing to see, because now you have more people who are able to contribute, right? And so I think that's all fundamentally a good thing. And the focus, at least from the expanding access crowd, this is great. And of course, this is from Cohere. So what Cohere is probably going to do is they're going to have this, and of course Command R is their like high intelligence thing. They're probably going to have like a combination, right? So Command R is, I believe, English only. Maybe some of a few other languages, I'm not entirely sure, but it's only English. And so what they're going to do probably is they're going to take Command R, and they're going to release like a multilingual version of it later, and then it's going to be really good, right? Because it's Cohere, and it's going to be able to sell to enterprises around the world, right? Because now, like Cohere is kind of pioneering this. Let's go as many languages as we want, right? And so what theoretically able to do is because Cohere, they're not here to create AGI. They're not here to do any of that. They're just here to make a good LLM for enterprise, and the enterprise can use it. And so the current LLM offering only English. But then if you have multiple languages, now a shop in Germany can use their LLM, and it's a nice enterprise system and all of that. A shop in maybe a few places in like remote Africa can have like an LLM that does stuff. Now, of course, in a lot of these places, there's a bunch of infrastructure stuff, but like Africa's developing fast, and so like having like LLMs in a bunch of places, like the enterprise opportunities in multiple languages are all like opened up and whatnot. And it's honestly a really great thing to see, right? Like expanding opportunities to this tech is great. And now we have the big news of this week, which is Claude Haiku 3.5, which is not yet released, they've announced it, and then the new Claude 3.5 Sonnet, or some people calling it Claude Sonnet 3.5.1, or Claude Sonnet 3.6, or Claude 3.5 Sonnet New. Like, Anthropic is using Claude 3.5 Sonnet as a brand name, and then they're not increasing the number, and it's like, come on, Anthropic, come on. What are you doing with the branding, right? And so this is the main thoughts I have, which is like, what is this branding? Like, please fix. But this model is very smart, right? It's a smarter model. And I think fundamentally this model is useful, it's better than the old Claude 3.5 Sonnet. But what was possible with the old Sonnet is still possible with the new Sonnet, right? Like this doesn't expand the possibilities of what's possible, it just does what it does better, right? And so like we can talk about this with like computer use, right? Like computer use is a thing Anthropic released where you can get Claude 3.5 Sonnet or Claude 3.5 Haiku, which they're going to release later, to use in the computer, right? So you can basically get it, you tell it, hey, you do this, and it will go and do that, right? And they had some cool, funny examples of it going wrong, but like, you can get the model to use a full computer, and it's cool. Though, I think my main thoughts on computer use are, it expands possibilities for people, right? Like imagine you're somebody who's like old and you don't really understand computers, but you want to like make a nice like happy birthday image for your, like assume you're old, right, and so you're trying to make like a happy birthday image for your like grandson or something, right? Now of course previously you would need to know image editing and all of that. Now you can just say is, hey Claude Sonnet, can you make a happy image birthday for my grandson and send it? And like because you know how people will sometimes say like good morning in every early morning, right? But like then it's like, hey, make a happy birthday that's like specific to him, right? Like he likes toy cars. Make a happy birthday image with a toy car. Like it's like toy car and then it's like a happy birthday. Previously they had to learn image editing, and that's like a whole bunch of work, and it's just like they want to help. They want to wish you a happy birthday in a nice way, right? But then now with Claude Sonnet, you can get them to go. It will take a picture of a car from the Google Images. It will put it into some image editing platform, and it will like say like happy birthday and then the name, and it's like personalized, and you can send it, and it's like all great, right? And so now you have more people who know what they want to do with computers, right? Like they want to do this type of stuff. They're just not super good with computers. And then you can get these models to help them do that type of stuff, right? Like will Claude 3.5 Sonnet replace like a lot of tech support people have to do? Probably not, right? But what it will probably end up doing is it'll probably end up allowing people to do some of the stuff on their own, right? Like now you have people with more autonomy when it comes to computers, right? Because yeah, they're just able to do stuff. And it can also be nice training wheels, right? It's like, hey, I'm trying to learn how to do this on my computer. Hey, Claude, can you show me how to do it? And it will show you how to do it. And then you can use that and you can learn from that on like, hey, here's how I actually do it on a computer, right? The main problem with computer use is that these LLMs are not super good at this type of stuff, right? Like I'm not saying they're bad, right? They're not bad. They're pretty decent at it. It's just that the LLMs, again, they fundamentally work with next token prediction. Right, and obviously, Anthropic has some nice post-training stuff, so that it's all there, right? But the LLMs fundamentally they work with, mainly with individual tokens, and the model like it's not really good at like visual doing stuff, right? Like if you're comparing it to say something that's more focused on actions, I'd argue like a true RL model, like the original like RL of like, here's the actions we can do, let's do them. They're going to be worse at it, right? And I think fundamentally the ideal is to have like a thinking portion and like a whole bunch of like output models, right? So you have like either text out, so you have like everything works in embedding in like latent space, like embedding latent space. You have text in, you have a bunch of inputs, and it's all gonna be like early fusion. It doesn't have to be early fusion. Early fusion is a cool concept, but like this, if you try and make like an action thing, it all go you have like encoders, and it all goes into like the like neural space or like latent space, you have the model, it like thinks a bunch, and then you bring it back up, right? And that's kind of what JEPA is. That is literally what JEPA is, right? It's like meta JEPA. But like, and I think that's kind of useful. It's just it's just the way stuff are right now. Like, this is all just hacks. We're all just doing hacks on top of these things because it's like, oh my god, I can do this, right? Like, this is like the concept of like, as you get bigger, there's emergent behavior, right? There's emergent properties, and it's like, oh, let's use this for this and this and this and this, and it's like, yes, as the models get smarter, they're better, but this is also just very inefficient, right? Like, obviously, it's inefficient. It's expensive, right? Like, what you could previously, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that people are doing now that if they engineered it better, right, like you could do on like a $5 a month server or like a $10 a month server, whereas now you're going to have to spend like $10 every day. Like, it's like 30x more expensive. It's probably way more. It's probably like 100x more expensive. Like a whole bunch of NLP stuff, it's just like throw an LLM at it, problem solved. Right? It's like, it's expensive. It's all expensive. Like, LLMs will always be more expensive than just writing good NLP code because LLMs are a lot of compute, right? Because fundamentally, this is just next token prediction that we're like hacking into a whole bunch of this stuff. And so this whole like process and planning and all of that's like that we're all doing to these LLMs. It's all there to effectively try to get it to do behaviors that we're like, this is what a smart AI does in sci-fi. Let's train the model to do that. And I think fundamentally it's like a whole bunch of stuff people are doing here is just like, there's smarter ways to do this. It's just, this is a technique they have, and when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? When all you have is LLMs, and that's the smartest thing you have, everything looks like a nail. And so these people that are fine-tuning these in, fine-tuning these in, fine-tuning these in, fine-tuning these in, and it's just like, that's a lot of things that are probably not nails, right? Like, yes, you can use a screw as a nail, and it's going to work fine, probably. It's just, it's like you just end up with problems, right? And I think that's what you kind of end up having is just, it ends up like that. It's not consistent, right? Like when they say the examples, you had the Claude Sonnet like go do something else for a little bit because it's not trying to think about how to solve your problem the best, and obviously they fine-tuned it and fine-tuned it and fine-tuned it and fine-tuned it. It's that they're trying to effectively force the model into doing stuff, and it's just like cool, right? And I think over time I've become less and less of like a let's go bigger model, let's do all of this type of stuff. I'm becoming more and more of a, you need to have a smarter way of doing things, right? Because like this stuff is, the way that people are doing it is like not super, like it's a thing that's happening that's just like, okay, but like, it's not the smartest way to do things, right? Like if you look at the way the people are doing like the LLMs in Minecraft, right? What they have is they have the LLM interacting with the text like thing. So they're getting the image from like what the model is seeing, and it's like interacting with the texting of like what action to do, right? And it's like all text, and it's like cool. The models are smart. They're doing stuff, and they're able to think in this type of stuff. But like, it's pretty much just like a let's see if the model can do it. Oh, that's cool. It is. It's able to work in text, and it's like, I don't know. It's just tends to be a lot more like, I think it's just forcing it into text and doing stuff instead of like having much more multimodal stuff. It's just also the problem here is that text is the only large amount of training data we have, right? Like from the dawn of the internet to now, basically most of the data humans have generated is text, right? Like it's all like, hey, let's generate, like it's all text communications. Every website is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is all text. Like all the communications people have are mainly text. It's all text. And it's like we have so much text training data, we just don't have like many action training data because you don't send actions over the internet, you send text over the internet. Actions are things you do, right? And so I think fundamentally, like if you're trying to get AGI, right? Like the new Claude Sonnet, right? After trying it for a bunch, it's very much falling into the same traps that the old Sonnet is, where it's just like sometimes it just loses its mind, right? Because as much post-training as you do and as good as it is, it's still pretty on and off. And I think fundamentally the way to AGI is not through crazy amounts of text. Obviously that's one of the things we can do is through RL, right? Like doing RL on stuff, right? Having a Minecraft agent that does RL in Minecraft, right? Like doing it all via RL and using RL as the way to do things instead of whatever it is we're doing now with like insane scales, right? Like if you look at these models, right? Like you look at the costs. Now, I'm assuming that Claude Sonnet is going to be a similar scale to Commando Plus, right, which is like a 300B model, right? Because that's roughly where the pricing is. Because Llama is obviously dirt cheap, right? But it's probably going to be like a 300 to 400 billion parameter model. And that's a lot, right? Like, it's just a crazy number of parameters, and it's like the only meaningful way people are seeing to scale beyond GPT-4 level intelligence is training a crazy large model. Like GPT-5 is what, like rumored to have like, I forget if it's like 18 or 180 trillion, which is a big difference, I know. It's order of magnitude. But I've seen some rumors that it's a 180 trillion parameter model. And it's like, okay, that's insanely expensive, right? And I think it's like people are just scaling. And if some of the rumors are true, Anthropic didn't put out Claude 3.5 Opus because it didn't perform well. It's not that much better than the new Sonnet, right? Like there's a limit to the capabilities here, right? And so, depending on your definition of AGI, like whatever, right? Like I think there is a peak to performance here. We're on the slowdown of the growth, right? Like again, exponential compute leads to a linear increase in performance, and we only have so much compute right now. When most of the compute in the world is being put to train these models, there's not that much room to grow compute. And when the limiting factor is energy, and energy takes a long time to create, there you go, right? And I think these models, they're getting more, like, they're hitting the limits of how much compute can be thrown at the problem, because this is a very, like, I'm not saying this is a super inefficient approach. This is way more efficient than what was happening previously with like RNNs and LSTMs and whatnot. But it's still like, it may scale better in terms of training, but it's still like, you still have to like have the scale and whatnot, and training data is your limiting factor. Not really, but like, it's like your limiting factor here is just like, it's not super efficient, right? And so if there was more efficient architectures, yes, of course. But the main problem people are solving in architectures is not intelligence training efficiency, it's context window efficiency, right? Like a bunch of stuff is going into, can we expand context? Can we expand context? Can I expand context? And it's like, okay, you really, like you're kind of stuck, you know, you're kind of stuck with like transformers, and then now Mamba's there, and Mamba's doing pretty well. But like, it's all like, nobody's trying to scale intelligence or like usefulness in these ways. And I think fundamentally, a bunch of stuff that's possible now was possible with original GPT-4 back in the day with good prompting, right? Like, none of the stuff we're doing now is like a leap and bound over the original GPT-4. Like, obviously the models are better, but it's not crazy leaps and bounds. We're still stuck, right? Because again, OpenAI has not released a GPT 3.5, a GPT 4.5. Like, Llama's obviously trying to scale to be better and better, but everybody's focusing on efficiency now. They're not focusing on raw intelligence, right? And obviously you have OpenAI trying to with O1, but the problem with O1 is that it's expensive, and I think they're probably going to train smaller models of it and make it more efficient. But like, again, it's like, how much money can you throw at the problem? Like, this isn't making it more efficient. This is just throwing more money at the problem and hoping it goes away, right? And that's kind of how a bunch of research works. But like, again, you're kind of stuck here. And so, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for watching this episode of the Weekly AI Yap. I hope you really enjoyed it. I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.